Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Wright from ClickArmor, and welcome to the live Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. This is a bi-weekly series of sessions that we typically will do for about 45 minutes. I think that's typically how long each one has lasted so far, on a different theme every session. And we try and keep things a little bit informal, but somewhat structured so that we don't waste people's time and we get some good value out of it. So I see we've got quite a few people here started with us. We've got myself, who I'm CEO of ClickArmor and kind of started this whole thing, but also along with us, an original panelist, AJ Leese, and also Tyler Sweaney. So we also have a new panelist today. And so I'd like to introduce Alexandra Panorados, and I'm hoping that I can get her. I think she's in the panel now.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Alexandra. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, and please call me Alex. And yes, you nailed the last name, so thank you.
Oh, awesome. I've been practicing it all morning.
I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, people who've been on before kind of know who AJ and Tyler and I are, but maybe it'd be great if you could introduce yourself, because I think you'd be a great fit to our panel today.
Oh, thank you. Well, Alex Panaretos, I lead EY America's human risk practice for North and South America. So we deal with everything from insider threat, incident response, to human risk instead of awareness and training, because it really is managing risks from human activity, to social engineering, behavior modification, and then your standard education and communications. So privileged to be here today. This is obviously one of my busiest times of the year, coming up to October. So happy to answer any questions I can today, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well, welcome. I just stopped sharing my screen so we can all sort of see each other at regular size. I was not able to see anybody except for the person talking, and that was usually me until Alex joined us. So I'd like to just do a quick roundtable with AJ and Tyler, just have them do quick intros for those who haven't seen them before either. So AJ, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, founder, managing director of Syntax Security. I've been in the business now for about 10 years. And our mission is simple. We design games that benefit your security program. So we like to have a lot of fun and create all kinds of effective security solutions, while also making sure that everybody from the C-suite to the mailroom cares about your security program.
Awesome. And it's great to have you on again. I know you weren't able to make it last time, so it's good to see you again. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Missed out on the last, one or two. So I'm excited to be back. Nice to see some new faces here and the same faces. I'm a newcomer here. I'm the young buck. I definitely don't have the experience under my belt. I've been doing this for about a year. I work as a cybersecurity specialist and account executive at a managed service provider here in California called Global CTI. I work with, system admins, directors of IT, chief information officers on, trying to get them secure and, doing it ahead of time. Hopefully that's my preference, but
yeah,
we've all seen, I'm sure that get a lot of those calls at 5 6 in the morning. Hey, that security stuff you were talking about? We got ransomware. Does that work now? Not quite.
Yeah. So yeah, it's great to have you here, Tyler, because you've got a great broad, exposure to all the kinds of risks and things, especially from end users that are within your clients' organizations as well. So happy to have everybody here. I just want to have a couple of housekeeping notes. I can't always see the chat, but I'm going to ask the other panelists to, wave their hands or yell at me if there's somebody who has made a good point or has a question. And other than that, typically what I'll do is just go through a couple of slides. Last couple of times we used some polling tools. This time I'm going to keep it a little informal. I think I've enabled chat so that everybody can enter stuff in the chat room. And what's fun to start with is I would really like it if you could type in where you're coming in from to this session, and just say hi from wherever, and we'll get a chance to see all of the locations that you're coming from. I just got to find my chat screen now. All right. Maybe you guys can yell out where they're coming from, because oh, there we go. Okay. So well, I got to go a long way back up to see.
Wow, we got quite a turnout. This is
I think we can call this the global call now, since we have someone from the UK and someone from Toronto and.
That's right. Charlottesville, Austin.
This is awesome.
Bristol.
We got anybody else from Cali? No one else from California. No West Coasters here.
I thought I saw one.
There could be. It's somewhere lost in the chat here, but
maybe not.
Gay from Guelph, Albany, Florida, Stittsville. Only I know where that is, but it's not far from me. I also have to apologize to anyone who signed up for this who's in a time zone where it's not convenient. So we actually had a few people from Australia register, but it's got to be like 2 a.m. there for them. So
that's commitment.
If anybody on the call or who's watching this later from those time zones would like to kind of commit to doing this on a regular basis, I don't mind doing it at midnight or late evening once in a while, and we can try and make this more inclusive for those folks on the other side of the world. But anyway, all that to say, let's try and get some good stuff going here and have some fun. So I'm going to share my screen, just go back to my deck that we can use as a little bit of a guide for our discussion. And so what I typically do is reach out to a few people and say, what kinds of questions should we start with and topics. So what I just want you to do, you've already kind of been able to use the chat and put in where you're coming from. But when we ask these questions, love to hear people's inputs on ideas or even deeper questions that we might have in these areas. So we're going to start with, what's your greatest burning question about Security Awareness Month? It could be anything from getting budget to how do you find the time? What do you do for planning, measuring success, even coming up with ideas or new ways to engage people, communication, planning. Sometimes, I just discovered this today, that we're trying to do something for Security Awareness Month in one customer, and they're actually now starting to struggle with, okay, now this has to be approved at different levels, and we have for accessibility and things. So all that stuff, I just thought, be good for people to just put in the chat what you are concerned with respect to Security Awareness Month. Are there things that you would like to either ask here or provide some tips on? That would be awesome. So let's, again, go back to the chat and see if anybody has some thoughts here. Let's see, content. Terry's mentioned content. Norman's asking if there's value in monitoring the dark web. So that could be something interesting that we could touch on as well. There are tools out there that might be eye-opening for people to see what kinds of stuff is available on the dark web. You might not talk about it a lot, but sometimes it's good for people to learn about those things. So those are the topics that we'd love to be able to zero in on. So we're going to actually focus in a little bit more on each of these things a little bit and start asking some questions and getting people's feedback, both initially from the panel, and then we'll open it up to people's chat responses and questions. So let's talk about how we can define success for Security Awareness Month. From my experience, years and years ago, oh, gee, it's October, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I haven't done anything. Well, I'll do it next year. So next, I try and make a note, August, September, try to put something together, So how do you know if you're doing anything that's useful or valuable? So I'm going to start with AJ and just go around the panel a little bit. And you can speak to any of these questions as well.
Yeah, I think when it comes to success, the big question I sort of have to put back would be, what are you trying to get out of it? Because the big question with security awareness is always, what behavior are you trying to influence with regards to your security program? And I'm sure there's no shortage of, hey, we want people to stop clicking as much as possible. Yeah, that's great. But there's certainly a lot of other kind of nuances that can go into that behavior measurement. So how do you really define success is really going to be relative to what your security program expects from your awareness training. That's sort of that might be a little bit of a circular question. So maybe some good examples of this would be, when we're trying to influence faster reporting. of something. We know people are going to click, but if they click something wrong, do we want people to be, faster reporting? What does that metric look like? When we're coming to terms with other kind of behaviors, like third-party vendor risk management, do we want a faster vendor risk management process? Does the awareness play into that in some capacity or another? So with regards to success, yeah, the short answer is it really depends what you're after.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on any of the other KPIs, things that you've seen work or that are useful?
Again, I think it just sort of goes back to, what metrics are relevant, right? And they're all going to be unique. But some that really stand up would be the reporting time, right? How long between something being observed and being reported. And, we also have to take into account people who maybe don't read emails and simply wouldn't report that. Or what is another metric that I think is really quite interesting that we could consider, maybe a little outside the awareness, but would be how quickly does it take for your security team to investigate these? So that could possibly go hand in hand with some, intricate awareness configuration there. But yeah, as far as those go, I don't really have much of a favorite. I like the time to reporting in that distance, because that right there, if you can make it seamless and easy for somebody to just make those reports and then you get that information right away, those metrics do provide some value.
Good. All right. And just a note to AJ and Tyler and Alex, I had not enabled you guys to actually put chat messages out to everyone. I think you could chat to each other, but now you should be able to reach everyone. So if you have comments as well, feel free to put them in the chat. And also, I'll just turn it over to Tyler for a second, and we'll give Alex the last comment on measuring success.
Well, I think, you hit on just about all the good KPIs, way to take them from me. But I think one that Scott and I have talked about, and we've talked about before, and this is just, it's as basic as it gets, but it's engagement, right? Engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Your phishing test results, the click rates, all that kind of stuff. If people aren't engaged, and even if they do well, during the month, it's that engagement, I think, that really leads to it translating, to real world results.
Yeah.
And like with ClickArmor, for example, that's where you have gamification, giving them a reason to be engaged, other than they have to do it. And the way we've implemented it, other ways to make it engaging are, making it competitive, leaderboards, that type of stuff. But yeah, for me, you can get in the nitty gritty all you want, but if they're not engaged, you're not going to see any success.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I'll make my comments later on, but I think engagement is certainly something that we want as a minimum, right, out of this special initiative. So good point, Tyler. Alex, what would you like to say about measuring success in Security Awareness Month?
Yeah, well, I think we need to kind of draw a line between metrics for Security Awareness Month activities and metrics for your program.
Yes.
Because a lot of times they will be very, very different. So if you have a shared mailbox or an intranet site or anything like that, some sort of feedback mechanism, you want to monitor your traffic to that kind of right now before you start a lot of your activities, and then 30, 60, 90 days after, because what you want is people starting to engage with you. And through that engagement, like everybody's talking about, that's where the opportunities for conversation exist. I will tell you, in a lot of the companies that I work for, the hardest thing to overcome is the perception of the security department. So that's usually, before I tell you, stop sharing knowledge about security, make people want to talk to you. Get out and make friends with people in the business unit. Security is here to allow the business to do what they need to do. We are not here to tell the business how to do what they need to do. And so making friends in different business units, understanding how different areas of your business operate. What are the busy times? Do people see you as, I hesitate to say friendly, but friendly? Or are they fearful to engage you? One, because they might seem ignorant in their comments, which is something I hear in feedback a lot. I don't want to be made to feel like I don't feel smart or my question isn't relevant. Or are they fearful of some repercussion, whether imagined or valid? I will tell security teams that I work with so often, fear is not a motivator. If your people are scared to engage with you, if they're scared to tell you that they clicked on something, made a mistake, they're seeing something offline that might be important. If people don't want to engage with you, you will never have a successful program. So I think keeping that in mind, number one, is where you really need to start. How do people in the organization perceive you?
Mhm.
And use Security Awareness Month to change that.
Right.
This is your PR campaign for security.
Yeah.
Get out, get amongst the people, start asking the questions right now.
Mhm.
What do you guys want to know about? Are you concerned about your children online? Are you concerned about senior citizens online? So many people in the workforce are in that sandwich generation where they have both, children and elderly folks in the home. Start talking about things that are personally relevant. And that's where you start getting your eyes, ears, hearts, and minds. So then anything you do for the rest of the year really lands well. So think about Awareness Month, not only as potential to share knowledge and change behavior, but as the PR month for security.
Yeah, I love that.
Leverage that.
Love that. That's awesome. And to me, that's something that should be consistent every year, right? You're aiming for that constant sort of metric that you can use to measure a trend. And that goes to my third question here: was should you use the same KPIs each year? Well, certainly that one is one you want to have every year. Awesome. Just one more. We have one more panelist, I think, that's joined. Fletus, are you there?
I am, sir.
Awesome. So Fletus is one of our past panelists, usually a regular. When was a little bit late this morning, or this afternoon. So I'll just let you do a quick intro and ask if you have any comments on measuring success.
So I'm Fletus Poston. I currently serve as a SOC manager for a backup and recovery software solution based here in the U.S. And just to add on, I think it's excellent that we use KPIs as a way to market and brand what our organization is capable of. So that's what I'll add as I came in towards the tail end of the conversation. It is a good marketing tool if it's done correctly and it's measurable, which all KPIs should be.
Excellent. That's great. And we have a great comment here from Elaine Martin in Edmonton. So it's success in Security Awareness Month is an interesting topic. I think there are different KPIs depending on perspectives. My comms team is using engagement KPIs, page hits, views, participation in contests, and I'm wanting to monitor behavior changes after CSAM. So that's great. So I'll be monitoring whether or not the efforts have led to any behavior changes that we target through CSAM. Love the 30, 60, 90 approach post CSAM. So that's awesome. Thanks very much, Elaine. All right, so let's move on and look at the concept of top-down support. Sometimes it's hard to get people involved from the top. I'm going to see if people have any comments around what it takes to get top-level involvement and what people are doing in that area. So I'm going to start this time with Alex, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about top-level executive support for Cybersecurity Awareness Month and maybe versus the whole program.
Yeah, I think it really starts with, number one, do your executives understand what you do? Do they even themselves understand what the purpose of your role, team, et cetera is? So again, it all goes back to branding of the program. Explain to them that you're managing the risk that can't be controlled with a tool or technology, because I think that is often overlooked. Human awareness, human risk is all about what we do. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet for controlling human behavior yet. I'm sure at some point there may be. But right now, it's getting your executives to understand we are trying to deal with the X factor. There is so much that we can't control on a daily basis. And we're using this month to really help describe how to be secure in a digital world. I think sometimes sitting down with executives and showing them all of the ways that their potential behavior is putting both themselves and their families at risk is a great intro conversation. Do you understand, because of your position, all the different risks that you have? You're at a higher risk for social engineering, you're at a higher risk for having your family accounts compromised, et cetera. And oftentimes that initial conversation leads them to say, how can we do more of this? Which then turns to everybody's favorite topic of getting more budget and hopefully more resources.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a minute too.
Yeah, so sometimes they just need to understand what you're doing, and the best way to do that is make them your audience.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It just makes me think, obviously, if you can actually tailor a messaging campaign to the executives, right? It doesn't have to be long, but yeah.
Make sure you also do not delineate between the executive and their core assistant group. They are one and the same individual. Oftentimes the assistants have more power with information than the executives do. So make sure that you keep those two as one, I'll call it persona in your events. Do not separate them. They are one and the same.
Awesome. Excellent. Let's move on to who haven't we done? Oh, I guess you were the first one this time. So let's start with Fletus.
So I think that's an excellent point, Alex. I'm finding ways to deliver a message to them that's personal. I think with some of the later breaches we've seen, some of the issues of where they've targeted their family members to get in. So they've hit their personal accounts, and understand how, like we've talked in previous calls, how this applies both in your professional life and your personal life. So if you can tailor to them how this could impact them both at work and at home, you generally get their ear a little bit longer. Like when you share stories about they compromised your wife's account, they compromised your child's account, and now they have access to you because they're at that point, you're likely on the same device. You could be sharing an iPad, sharing a computer. And if they compromise that personal device, they now have access to potentially corporate data because you may be doing bring your own device, or you're sending stuff home, or you're sharing stuff through a cloud service provider that allows you to, at that point, go that way. So from a security operations point of view, those are things that I think about and I like to share with my leaders, is how their hygiene is important and their family's hygiene can impact them as well. So that's how I get the executives to think outside the box, and to your point, allow for a more targeted, more budget, more resource. It doesn't take a big budget sometimes to get awareness out. It just needs to come from the right audience, which is our second bullet point of how do we get interviews from them? How do they share what they're doing, what they believe, what their thoughts are, and it's coming from their mouth. Either through a fireside chat, through a blog, through an interview, through an all hands meeting, those kind of ways to get the top to share it. So it's not just coming from a marketing person or a comms person or your awareness professional. So.
Awesome. Excellent. How about Tyler?
Great points. I play translator a lot of times between the IT department and executives, because I'm sure we're all aware, those are two different languages. I can speak all day with IT guys and directors about the technical stuff, why, all the technical reasons. But my rule of thumb, and something that always works with me, is when you're speaking with, C-suite or executives, it's about results. And, it's about the business impact. That's what they care about. Security is great and all, but this is going to cost them money. What's the business case? What's the cost benefit analysis? And making it real in a business sense. But like you guys said, I think also hearkening home to the personal side of it. Because one thing I've noticed, at least personally, is a lot of executives happen to use their own device for a lot of stuff. They won't be bring your own device for anyone else in the organization, but they have their own stuff.
They're special.
I've personally seen that be the cause, the impetus for several ransomware attacks. Wow. Everybody else's device had, endpoint protection, but theirs didn't.
Wow.
And sometimes it's because of the age gap, to be in an executive level role. You're not, 23 years old like I am. I wish, right? But I think making it real, but also presenting that business case, because for Security Awareness Month and just in general, it has to be something that permeates the entire organization.
Cool.
And if you're not leading from the front, people aren't going to follow your example. Yeah,
absolutely. Great points, Tyler. More wisdom than your age shows.
Thank you.
And AJ, I think you're the last one.
I usually like to showcase this is what's happened to your competition. So in the awareness training sessions that I provide, it's usually this is what's facing your industry. Not only this is what the attackers are up to, or this is how they work, But moreover, this is some of the things that have happened to businesses not a whole lot different from yours in the same industry. So when you put that into perspective, they might know somebody over there, they might understand how some of that business works, or they may have even come from that business at some point and went, oh yeah, okay, I remember those, or this type of scenario. And then that starts to hit home a little bit, because when we hear about these breaches and we hear about this impact, it's easy to go, well, that's over there, it's a different company, it won't happen to us, right? But when it's in the same industry and these are the attackers and these are how they work and we have a lot of the same systems, that does start to drive some of that point home. And then you start to reinforce the need for a lot of this educational training and a lot of this awareness, and then the ease of reporting that goes into it. So it makes the conversations about where's the money a lot easier when we can showcase, hey, listen, the cost of control is X, the cost of doing nothing might be everything. So it really depends.
That's awesome. You guys make my life so easy here, because you say everything that I was hoping would be said. So I don't really have much to add here, but there's definitely some comments. I think Laura says that she finds executives can understand the need for cybersecurity awareness and awareness month when it's described in relation to managing health risks. So we change behavior to health risks through awareness campaigns, and they are the authority figures that will result in the biggest influence. So it's a great analogy for sure, and people can pretty easily relate to that. That's awesome. Wow, we're getting more comments than I can relay here sometimes. But Tyler says, saying it won't happen to us is almost like saying this ship is unsinkable. You're just sort of flying in the face of God then. So we'll try and capture some of the chat messages and hopefully provide those somehow to people too, because there's lots of good discussion here. But we've got other questions too. I'd love to get everybody's opinions on.
So one other comment there that as
Sure.
you're getting to this, that I've found in a previous company that I worked with, is we were a regulated utility. So we always had safety moments. So when you get your executives to do cyber moments, or you open meetings with cyber moments, or another way to bring that health aspect in, because what you do at a keyboard can affect, especially at a utility, the safety of your state, your country that you live in, because of the grid and other utility aspects of that. So just realizing that there's a cyber moment and a safety moment, and actually they're interchangeable, because cyber can be attributed to safety and safety can be attributed to cyber if hygiene is done correctly. So
that's awesome, because it fits exactly when I was doing a project with a utility, and they have great safety regimes, like you said, and they're trying to get cyber somehow in there. And I one of the things we decided to do was a messaging campaign that started with safety relies on security. If you don't have good security on all your systems, a lot of those systems can end up causing physical injury to people. So those are really interesting ways to portray them. Awesome.
I like what Elaine said about data having value. Not a lot of folks think that the data itself is worth something, but that saying data is the new oil, that trope exists for a reason. So I think by having those conversations about this is what a credit card number goes for on the open market, or this is how much you can buy access for, and that usually requires credentials, kind of thing. Just by showcasing that value that to the attackers, not just purely from what it gets them inside your business, but from this is the actual money that it would cost. That's always an interesting conversation, and I've found that inspires a lot of follow-up questions. So that's another good point.
Yeah,
AJ, that was.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Pardon. I was going to say, you caught me right before I was going to comment on what Elaine said. That's something I love. I do the digging on the dark web, deep web. It's not as hard as people think. It's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper, to buy ransomware, bank account numbers. And that's one of the things I just love to do to make it real to people, because, a lot of people have this perception. It's an 80s movie. You have a vacuum tube, monitor with green, code going down at some guys in his basement. And
of course there's beeping going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he's clacking away. I'm in. No, it's a marketplace. You can buy, hey, I saw one, for example, it was like, here are 1,000, Wells Fargo accounts with at least $10,000 in them. And it was a couple $100. And this is all legitimate, and you can buy ransomware, steal identity. There is a huge black market. When people see that, it's like, okay, imagine Amazon, But, with all this kind of stuff, and it drives it home to where, it's not always, oh, this organization, I'm going to target them specifically. I mean, we'll see that with, spear phishing, whaling, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But a lot of times it's cast a wide net and, just sell it. And there are enough people out there. It's a whole underground industry.
Mhm.
Cool.
To that, oh, sorry, Scott. I wanted to piggyback on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not just the data that has value, but what is the company's reputation worth?
Exactly.
What can you put a dollar sign or whatever local currency may be to the company's reputation? Because inevitably that also takes a hit if there's any sort of issue. And so think about that, because I have companies I work with that have entire public relations campaigns ready to launch if their immediate competitor has a breach. So don't think that there isn't a competitive advantage
Mhm.
to showing how much more secure you may be compared to your peer in a time of crisis. So keep that reputational value up there as well in the conversation, along with just the value of each piece of data.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's actually one little funny story. Well, maybe not funny for some people. Here in Canada, we have two major mobile carriers, Bell and Telus, and three, and Rogers. Rogers actually went down for 2 days, and like nobody using the mobile network was able to do anything. And of course, you can imagine the competitors' responses. They were very witty. They weren't too overt because it could happen to them anytime. But yeah, it's interesting to see how the competitive angle can play into things if your security and including your availability could be affected. So did I miss anybody on the round table? I think Tyler, AJ hasn't.
Well, I just
AJ?
chimed in there. So I think
you
good.
did. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think we're all
right.
covered. Yeah,
All right.
I liked what Elaine wrote about that data piece.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's move on to budget. Obviously, a big question sometimes for security awareness managers. How do you get budget? How much do you need? Stuff like that. So let's start with maybe Tyler this time.
Well, I don't particularly manage these things on my own.
Right.
More so, I work with companies in terms of, what they want to allocate. My preference is always towards long-term strategy. I would rather see, that spending allocated, over an extended period of time in terms of awareness versus, hey, we're going to dump half our budget into, security awareness month. But I think it's relative to the organization. And I think that's something that's, I don't think anybody can put like a particular number. Maybe like you guys can, you are a little bit more experienced in this field. But I think it all revolves around those KPIs and what's necessary to build that out and to have an immersive and interactive experience. And when I say interactive, I don't just mean they're doing it, but they're engaged. Maybe engagement is probably a better word for it. So I'll have to defer on the
Okay.
budgetary side.
Okay. I think Fletus probably had. I think he's one of the guys that chimed in on suggesting this question. So I'm going to let him run with it for a little bit.
So depends on the size of your organization. So I think when you get to your small startups, do you get to your small first couple hundred employees, this budget item is likely an line item with a half of an employee in the organization, or you give it to the line of business to do their own awareness at their level as you grow it. So to how much budget do you need? It's usually starting with very nominal. It could be something as simple as just getting a few stickers, a few flyers, printing out a few materials and just starting with it. Or if you have the capabilities inside of your organization, build splash screens, lock screens that are nominal because you can use just basic software and then apply it to your registry on your Windows and push it out to global policy. And you've got awareness very quickly that you can just push on a lock screen. That's nominal dollars. Or you can engage small consulting firms to come in and do a half-day training if you've got a small enough. So the budget generally comes as you grow your organization versus when you first start, because it can be as simple as a flyer, an email, a poster, a lock screen, a kiosk. As I said, the cyber moments and meetings, budget grows as the organization develops and matures. So that's why I think budget is a tricky one, as Tyler already mentioned, because it's usually already built in and it's just not a single line item.
Mhm.
Security awareness is taught when you onboard a person. It's part of their training. It's part of their safety awareness. It's part of their all hands meetings. Safety and security tends to come up, but it's usually like sprinkled in. So I think budget is a very tricky part for most organizations because it's a sprinkle mentality, which is the appropriate way of doing awareness. Because if I fire hose you with awareness on your day one, week one, or early on in your development as an organization, I'm going to overwhelm you, and you're no longer going to get the value out of the dollar you spent. So it needs to be sprinkled in. And as you grow, that's when you hire the awareness team. It's when you form an awareness organization. And as you get large enough, you can actually put an awareness officer inside of your organization if you're big enough and have a global or international presence, where you build teams across your geolocations and offices to make it applicable versus the small niche of a startup to a couple thousand employees.
Makes sense. Alex, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I like talking about the free stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Because all too often, let's be honest, even when you have budget, you really don't have budget. It's very rare that you have a dedicated pool of money for this. So what do you do if you're small, if you just don't have the budget, et cetera? Reach out to local law enforcement. They have plenty of people who will come and speak on certain topics. Sometimes it's awesome to get a voice from outside the organization, kind of singing the same hymnal that you are. It just helps to reinforce the messaging and why this is important. You know, I jokingly say, you might not listen to mom or dad, but you're going to listen to your favorite aunt or uncle. And so sometimes having that voice from outside reiterate a lot of the key messaging or threats or whatever it may be is really helpful. It also helps to do kind of a live, if you have a hybrid working environment or if you have a manufacturing or something like that, have part webinar, part live panel, and just ask the audience. A lot of times you can gather some great data points about what your organization needs to know or wants to know about from just kind of ask an expert type series. So do a webinar where, you know, every Friday at noon, you're going to have kind of that professional office hours where you can just ask anything to a security person. That's really helpful. And then another one that we did is crowdsource material from your own employees. Your employees are incredibly creative. We did a meme contest at one client where we basically just gave out taglines and said, make a meme, and we're going to highlight our winner every week on the intranet page. And it actually took on a life of its own and became their campaign for the entire year because it was so well received. And one of them was, when something isn't right, contact security. And there was a picture sent in of a woman sniffing a milk carton. Yeah, we all have those relatable moments. Yep. And it showed, again, for that branding of your security department, that we had a sense of humor. Then one publication had, here's our new intranet site, along with a big tagline that says, finally, something security wants you to click on. So, poking fun at ourselves is oftentimes the best way to get that engagement, because it's like, wait a second, that's unexpected. And that stands above the rest of the corporate noise, which is really where the challenge is. Yeah. What can you do that looks different, that feels different? Take folks food if you can. Take them donuts. It's amazing what happens and the gathering that you get when you feed people. We're all eternally 12. Let's be honest. What is going to get us excited to do something different for 15 minutes out of our workday? That's what you want to look for. Nice. And it's free.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, those are awesome ideas, and they touch on some other things that we'll probably mention later on too. So that's awesome. AJ, I think you're the last one to go.
Yeah, all of those were solid. The meme contest makes perfect sense because there is a lot of humor in this industry that I think, for the longest time it was, we can't ever poke fun at security. No, we should always poke fun at security because that's where some of the best information comes from too. So I really like all of those ideas were really excellent. It sort of boils down to, do you have the time and capacity to buy or build? that really becomes part of it. So there are a lot of free resources out there. We have to take the time to curate through them and figure out if they either work for what you're trying to do from a behavior standpoint, or whether they actually align with your organization. I mean, if you're not in industrial control systems, awareness training targeting ICS probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you in e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those you have to go through and do some of that work ahead of time. So there's always going to be a little bit of that kind of labor cost. Another thing that I really found really successful in a way to do it for free is, same idea. You cultivate some of that growth inside the industry, just sort of what Alex was touching on there. You cultivate that within your own business. I used to lead a webinar called Security Matters, and it was just 1 hour at the end of the month. And it was, let's just have a conversation about security in general and some of the cool things that go along with it. And that got a lot of people really interested as like in a security career standpoint, to the point where now the organization had some viable candidates to start growing their own. So it is a possibility, and it does bear a lot of fruit as long as you're willing to invest some time into it.
Awesome. Pardon me, guys, for flipping through the slides. I just want to make sure that we have time to cover everything. But some of the things that were discussed here, the ideas of things you can do that are not a lot of budget, are on this slide here. We talked about engagement, and the number one thing that's easy to do sometimes, and maybe too easy, and a bit of a cop out, is just to do some kind of special phishing exercises. But I think you can make a twist on that. Do the dark web thing. It may cost a little bit to do a search, but some vendors will do a one or two for free, and you can use that as a demonstration. So this is a list actually that I got from the book called the Security Culture Playbook, which I'd actually like to do a whole session on later on when maybe more people have had a chance to read it. But these are just some of the standard ideas of things that you can do to engage people, do lunch and learns, live demonstrations, webinars, videos, games, posters, all these things. And many of these things don't cost a lot of money. And I think, as Fletus said, it's probably not so much making a budget for Security Awareness Month. You kind of have to look at the whole year and then allocate some of that, in a small way, perhaps to do some not too expensive but impactful things within the month. So I'm going to just see from here if we want to go onto the topic of security champion. Actually, before we do that, a couple of really good comments from Laura and Elaine. I'm not going to get time to read them all, but I will try to capture them. And if you remind me later on, I'll share them with you. But we talk sometimes about security champions, or in the security culture book, they talk culture carrier, which is another term that I hadn't really heard of before. But there's certainly an opportunity within Cybersecurity Awareness Month to start a security champion program, or to do something more creative with getting engagement from the people in your organization who really do want to help. And so I'd like to sort of see if anybody in the panel has any thoughts on that. I'll just open it up and let whoever jumps in take the floor.
I've helped a lot of companies put this in, and the one kind of caveat to this being successful is it needs care and feeding. So to Fletus's point, you have to have the capacity to, one, identify who your champions are. What are the asks that you have of them? What does that role encompass? Obviously, what's in it for them? And then what are you going to require or ask of them throughout the month, the year, the whatever it may be? How are you going to push content to them? What is their role going to be, etc.? So before you even really engage in, let's say, who this is going to be, it's what do you want it to be? Why do you need it to exist? Is it simply as a force multiplier? Or is your organization big enough where you have regional or cultural differences where it makes sense to have somebody local to either translate, to help spread the word, whatever it may be? So there's some planning before you get to this point. That being said, there are people who will self-identify through just interaction with security team. Look at who are some of your frequent reporters, if that's something that tracks. Look at when you have events. Look at, are there any names that are consistent? Who's consistently dialing in? Who's engaging with the security team? Who just has a knack for it? The other part is you can ask some of your mid-level managers to say, do you have anyone on your team that might have an interest in this? And start to source that way. But please understand, if you don't know what you want them to do, when you want them to do it, and why you want them to do it. Do not try to build this in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
something
something-
to that I found, it's a interesting analogy and it works. You know, that let's just say school just started back for most of, so the kindergarten teacher brings the students into the room and asks every student, what are the classroom rules going to be this year? The teacher already knows what the rules are going to be, but empowering the students to name the rules, like we won't bite, we won't hit, we won't yell, we won't kick, we'll line up, we'll get quiet when the teacher says X. You can do the same thing with your employees. You come in and say, what is our security culture? What do you think our security culture should be? What is things we should do? And they're going to rattle off things that they find applicable. And then you're going to be able to take what they think and then spin it into, I hear what you said, but here's how we're going, like, and you can like roll it back. So you're empowering them to say they wrote the policy, they wrote the procedure of how we're going to do things, because they're vocalizing it. You already have in your mind, but you get them to say it. So it's kind of like baiting. And I don't really like baiting per se, but it works in a manner that allows your champions and your employees to say, I had a stake in writing this. I have ownership and how we do awareness, how we do X, how we do Y. And it doesn't just have to apply to awareness, anything like this. And again, previous employee, we had safety wardens on the floor in the case of an event. You can do the same thing with you. You know what your role is, to Alex's point, like you're to walk the floor, check the rooms. Same with your security champion. They walk the room. Did you lock your keyboard? Did you do a clean desk policy? Those are easy things that they can do. And then you reward them for helping them. And again, awareness month, I've seen people put like Swedish fish on their desk because they forgot to lock, or they put a sticker on their computer because they didn't lock it. And then you, on the opposite side, they give them something similar. If they did lock their PC, they did have a clean desk when they left for the day. They did X, Y, or Z. So it's simple things like that, of where they're handing out a gift or they're sharing things that are easily to attribute to other things that we do. So the analogy of the teacher and the student giving empowerment, you know what the rules are going to be, but when you ask your employees, they can help you build it, and it gives them empowerment and it gives them ownership in your plan and in your procedures. So.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything to say on the security champion idea?
Do you give out fish if people leave, like Swedish fish, if they leave their desk or their workstation unlocked? I just leave a VM open and get free candy all day long. I feel like that's just going to exacerbate the problem rather than resolve it.
So maybe it's for locking versus
unlocking. Okay, fair enough. I was like, the trick to that might be to leave like an actual fish.
Yeah, it's an actual fish.
One that's been sitting out in the sun for a while. That would stop that completely.
I think I just wanted to add as a part of this, I think, like you said, Alexandra, having like clear defined, what you want them to do is important. You can't just designate these people. But I think that, on top of those roles, what really I see a huge benefit from is you're kind of spreading the load out of who has to be asked for security questions, because I kind of operate, in between the technical and the office sales side. So a lot of times I play this role because it's a little intimidating to go to the director of IT or, security officer and ask, what you might feel like is a stupid question, right? I got this zip file and, whatever. When you have these culture carriers or security champions that are just ingrained in the organization and they're on a peer level, it's real easy to just ask, and it takes a second. Call them up, hey, got this email, it looks weird, can you take a look, what do you think? And making that a part of the culture, that's one of the most beneficial things that I think can come of this in particular.
That's awesome. If people know they can trust somebody, they can ask, they don't feel stupid asking the help
Exactly.
desk. We encourage them not to feel stupid asking for help from the help desk anyway, but some people still will. And if there's somebody they trust on the team that they know will be helpful, that's a really interesting idea. Any other final thoughts? We have less than 10 minutes left, so not too many more topics, but just want to give everybody a chance to chime in on it.
So just on a couple of things that have been mentioned, I want everyone to keep psychology in mind with this. And while we want to identify those who may not be locking screens or doing anything else, the reality is we're pointing out someone's mistake, which unfortunately tends to shut them down to any future things that we do. So you want to look for all the ways to reinforce positive behavior, because by default, that helps people know this is what I should be doing. I'll give you a quick example since somebody mentioned the Swedish fish. I had a client that had a lot of fun with it, and they didn't talk about the program at all. But one summer they put up what were similar to like Jaws movie posters and just said, there's something in the water. That's all they said. They didn't say anything about security. They didn't say anything else. And what they were doing was they were doing a weekly fishing campaign for 5 weeks. And so they sent it out. Everything went to 404. So nobody had any idea this was even happening. And at the end of that, they put, now, of course, this is pre-COVID, so they could do this. They put sweatshirts, lifeguard sweatshirts, on everyone who reported all 5. And so they said, thank you for saving the life of some of our data, because you guys weren't bitten by the fish/sharks. And so people came in the next day and are like, why do you have a sweatshirt and I don't? And it wasn't that they were pointing out, oh, you clicked 4 times out of the 5. It was highlighting those people for doing something really, really well. And then again, that started the conversation of, well, how did you get that? Which one was it? Who should it, oh, I got that. I didn't think anything of it. So think of different ways that you can call out the positive in a very public forum. If you have someone that reports a fish that is a legitimate malicious threat that got through everything else, highlight them as a cyber hero. Everybody needs the attaboys. And that in turn does that kind of crowdsourcing mentality of, well, I'm going to report next time. Or I'll get a token of appreciation, whatever it may be. And again, budgets and all of that. But look to highlight the positive more than the negative. Unless there's a supporting structure there to say, you made a mistake, no big deal, but here's why we do this. Don't just
I think
drop
something that kind of goes with that, Alex, I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about top down, is an organization I worked with in the past. The CISO would do shout outs for like a help desk analyst, a lineman, or a finance person by giving them like a lunch or a trophy or both, depending on if they were virtual, hybrid, where they worked. And it was a call out from him. They got something that they could keep on their desk as a reminder that I did this. And then again, the budgetary, come have lunch with me, come have breakfast with me, for just doing their job. So it was the help desk who was able to have the keen ear and elevate something to the SOC. For the lineman who saw something or see something, say something, or for the finance person who followed the procedure and didn't do the ACH change that could have led to the EC. Accolades for following procedure, for saying something, and for doing something. So it kind of goes to your psychology and psychology, both the psychology and sociology pieces that cyber brings to the table. So.
All right. Another one that I want to just touch on, if we can move on really quickly, we have like 5 minutes left, is just time allocation. To take a special month of the year and do special activities is going to take extra time. Anybody have any thoughts on how they plan for it? How far ahead do you have to plan and things like that?
So I try to look at a calendar and plan my next year out around activities that kind of are evergreen, whether it's summer travel, whether it's online shopping at the holidays. I kind of look to see what are going to be things that happen all the time, and then take what I talked about in January and do 5 minutes on that in October. What did I do in February, and do 5 months on that in October, almost like a refresh.
Nice.
So I'm not necessarily recreating the wheel, but I'm reinforcing messages they've heard throughout the year. And then take the last week or two to say, hey, guess what? Holidays are coming up. Here are all the different ways cyber criminals are going to try to compromise both your financial information, blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, make sure you're not putting your TV box out by your trash, because that's also a physical issue. So I use it as leverage for my last 2 months where people kind of check out for most organizations. But use October as reinforcement of everything you've done.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That year, and it kind of self-feeds.
Yeah, it's like content reuse in the marketing sense, right? You can make use of things that you've done every month that is trying to continue getting engagement. That's awesome. Anybody else have any special tips on timing?
And the only thing as I alluded to earlier, is just sprinkling into everything. As I said, the cyber moments in your meetings, in the email communications, just a tagline in your signature of reminding them if they see something, or again, as we talked in a previous thing, just understanding the anomalies. Is it something anomalous? Like just teaching them to, is this something that you normally do or see no matter what time of year? Does the C-suite usually do this? Does your manager usually do this? Does your coworkers usually do? And just anomaly detection is probably the biggest thing that I can preach as a security ops manager. That anomalies, like we're trained to see things that are consistent, but we also can see the anomalous activity. Like we should be trained and able to, as a human, to see this is normally red, today it's blue. Why is it blue? And start asking questions. Or it could be trivial as that. It's the color changed, just something changed, and to start asking questions. And then, as we talked in this thing, how does your champions get that to their security awareness, to your SOC, to your management when they see this anomalous? And it could just be a procedural change. Hey, this door is being propped. It shouldn't be propped. This door is, this window is not locked. Like if you're on a first floor and it has the ability to open a window for fresh air, like just seeing something and saying something, it doesn't have to be cyber related at times. We sometimes get stuck on cyber moments. There is a physical security component to Cybersecurity Awareness Month, because if they can get inside your building, they now have access to keyboard, which makes their job much easier from a cyber piece. So physical security leads to a degraded cyber posture. And we forget about that in our awareness training some days, of tailgating, propping doors, opening windows, leaving laptops in our front seat of our car when we go into the grocery store or gas station, even if it's just for 1 minute. We put physical assets exposed. So
cool. Yeah, those are all great points, and so many good points in the chat too. One thing I'd just like to ask people is, if you got some value out of this session, I'd like you to type in what you found to be the most useful takeaway of all the stuff that we discussed, whether it was about engagement or executive buy-in or timing or budget, etc. So if you just take a moment and type in what you think was the most valuable takeaway that you got from this session, that would be much appreciated. And while people are doing that, I'll just do my shameless little plug for ClickArmor. Some of the things that we talked about here really speak to me from the point of view of, budget. What can you do that's inexpensive and takes very little time? And we're actually offering a what we call a quick start bundle right now for ClickArmor. It's basically 6 weeks of training and what we call weekly challenges. And the timing is pretty good, but it's right now on a special price. So I'm not going to plug it by the price right now, but contact me if you want to learn more about that. And it is inexpensive, and it's a great way to do things without too much time being spent. And it really does engage people. So with that, any final thoughts, I think, from the panel, and we'll just wrap things up with 1 minute left.
Yeah, just have fun with your security awareness training. Whatever you do, make sure it's interesting. I mean, it doesn't have to be all PowerPoint slides, and keep it fun, keep it interesting, keep it accessible.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ. Alex?
I totally agree. Look for personal touch points. What can people instantly action, and give them something to do? Throw out the did you know your password challenge question answers aren't a true false test. Go answer it like your favorite character. That's something somebody can instantly action, and you've provided value. And so look for all of those just random did you know moments that you can have, and build the trust that way.
Excellent. Anybody else in the panel?
I mean, I think it's excellent. I just went through a training session that I helped modify, and one of our days was just on the haystack method of a password, just finding, instead of having to find a needle in a haystack, find the one element that's not there. So just changing the metaphor. So like that, or your home router, just simply saying, did you know you can change this setting? Go take a look. Did you know this admin password is publicly available if you did not change your admin on an IoT device? Just helping them know that, like, basic things they can change at their home network, their home environment, that they can quickly do during awareness too. It doesn't have to always apply to work. Like, go change your admin password on your router. Go change the settings on your IoT device, your Internet of Things. So your thermostat, your refrigerator, your toilet, whatever you've purchased, it's now internet based and has an IP address. And train them that these devices have IP addresses, that they are internet connected. They may not know that. Like something did you knows are great. Did you know?
Awesome.
I love that idea. So.
Yeah, that the did you knows are probably my favorite, just because, man, there's a lot of stuff where people just it blew my mind, and the home stuff is always easy, and passwords, because it's everybody. It's like I talked about passwords, like, okay, how random is it? Does it have your kids' names, your dog's names, your last name, your name, like, birth dates, anniversary, and everyone's just kind of like, yeah. So, let me show you how long that would take to brute force it. And then there's just one tool I'll finish up with is haveibeenpwned.com.
Yeah.
If none of you guys have heard of it, it's amazing. You put in your email address and it shows you how many leaks that you've been in. And I show people, and I'm like, look at that, 11. And I can go pull up one of these paste bins, and it has your name and that password that you happen to use for 115 other sites. And that's always an eye opener.
Awesome. You just reminded me, we have a little free self-assessment on our website as well called Can I Be Phished? And it's similar, except you can just go in and do a phishing sorting thing and learn what kinds of things you might have missed out of 10 emails. It's fun. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for joining. Did anybody not get a chance to put in their final 2 cents? I know we're just at the hour, so there's probably people waiting to go on to other meetings, but really appreciate all of you in the panel. Great to have you on, Alex, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And we will talk to you in 2 weeks, September 21st, 2 p.m. We'll do another one. We haven't decided on the topic yet, so stay tuned and we'll let you know.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.